You know, if you look at your little fraction circle that has 1/10, it also has what as a percent, Andrew? 1/10 is, what percent is on? 10%. And it also has the decimal, which is 0.1. Now, 10% is kind of its own special case because it's all made up of ones and zeros, but that's not always the case. If you look at your 25, your 1/4 circle, the fraction 1/4 equals what as a decimal, Jacob?
0.25.
Yep, and equals what as a percent? 25%. And these all mean the same thing, it's just that we use them in different cases to mean when we want different things. For example, if we're talking about free throw shooting, usually we use percent. You make 25%. Okay, but that's the same thing as saying you made 1 out of 4 free throws. Or you made this. If we're talking money, usually we use this. I mean, we don't talk about 25% of a dollar very often. When you go to the store, the sign doesn't say, well, this will cost you 25% of a dollar, does it? No, it uses the decimal. So each of these have their own different times when we use them, but you should be able to flip-flop from one to the other to the other. And some of them aren't very pretty. For example, your 1/8 inch piece as a decimal, that's not very nice. It's what? 0.125, right? And then as a percent, it's 12.5%. None of those are very fun to work with. You know, we don't have 1/8 of a dollar in money because we don't have, you know, we don't go to that part of a dollar. We don't have 1/1000th of a dollar. So some of it takes a little getting used to, but looking at some of the stuff here, let's go together. We're just going to do this together and see if we can't pick this out here. Number 1 there on activity 1 there, page 459. If you put 3 1/10 pieces together, you have what fraction of a circle? And I think you guys have been doing this, so it shouldn't be that tough. 3 1/10, Frankie, gives you how many?
3/10.
Well, look at you. What decimal would that be then?
0.3.
And what percent would that be?
3.
I didn't ask you that. Yeah, it does. Well, no, it doesn't. It says, is that greater or less than a half? Why? Because a half is 0.5. Yeah. If you fit 3 1/5 pieces together, 3 1/5 together gives you what, Colton? What fraction? 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5? 3/5, yeah. Now what decimal is that? 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5, Sam, is what decimal? What decimal, sir? Right decimals here. Decimals, decimals, decimals. You've got your 1/5 of a circle, which is what decimal? 0.2, right?
Yeah.
So if you have 3 of those, you have 3.2s, which is 0.6, right? Is that not what we have there? Do you have 1/5 in your notes? Okay, good. How about that? Is that greater or less than 1/2? Greater than 1/2. If, and here is where it gets tough, what about if you have that 1/8 piece, whoa, and you take away 1/4? Ooh. If you have 5 1/8 pieces away and take away 1/4, what are you left with? Well, first of all, if you have 5 1/8 pieces, what fraction is 5 1/8 pieces? 5/8, right? But then it said to do this, take away 1/4. Here's where it takes a little bit of thinking here. The reason people dislike working with fractions, ladies and gentlemen, is because you can't just do this. You can't just say 5 minus 1 is 4 and 8 minus 4 is 4, because that would give you 4. 4 is supposed to be 1, and there's no way that you take 5/8, subtract a 4th, you get a whole thing left. Anybody know what you'd have to do? Brian?
Instead of taking away 1/8, you have to take away 2/8, because 2/8 is equivalent to 1/4.
Right, you have to make, these fractions have to have the same bottom number for you to work with them. And since 1/4, to make 1/4, it's the same thing as having 2/8 put together. You have to change that 1/4. Take away the 2/8 from 5/8, and then you can do it because that would be 3/8. And that's why people dislike working with fractions, because it gets kind of crazy. What decimal would be 3/8? What happens if you have 0.125 3 times? Because that would be, each one of those is 1/8, you have 3/8. Adding all those together, anybody? 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15. 2, 4, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. 3.75. Is that bigger or smaller than a half? What?
Bigger.
You guys are so easily swayed. It's smaller than 1/2. How do you know it's smaller than a half? Because
It's under 500.
0.5, if you put 2 more zeros at the end of it, so it had the same number of things after the decimal. This is 500, that's 375. This is by far bigger. By far bigger. Gosh, you people are easy to sway there. I think you kind of pretty much get that one. I'm not going to go too much farther than that. Your assignment then is lesson 71. Lesson 71, and I do have a quiz, I think.